welcome. And for those who have already visited the session that I did in the morning, welcome again. It's also a very long day for you, also for me. So it's 7 hours ago I did my first session. But I am really excited today to also give you some insights on our BTP runtime strategy. So let's start this. And first of all, I want to make some information because 2 years ago at TechEd, we were talking a lot about the unified runtime strategy. And we got a lot of feedback and also questions around what that actually means and how we're proceeding with this. So basically, it's important to understand that when we're talking about unified runtime, we're not talking about a product or the next evolution of any environment of something. It's really a strategy that we're talking about here, where we really want to actually find a way where we can provide you the best way to actually work with BTP. So let's have a look at the strategy and what are the key principles of the strategy. So first of all, it's really important to understand that we defined 3 strategic runtimes that we're talking about on BTP currently. And this is, on the one hand side, of course, the ABAP environment. We have the Cloud Foundry runtime, and we have our Kyma runtime, right? For the ones that are missing Neo here on the slide, you know we announced that Neo will be end of life by the end of 2028. So please be aware we're talking here in this session. Mainly, we will cover also Neo at the end a bit, but we will really talk about the strategy and going forward with the runtimes. So the second thing that is very important to understand when we talk about our runtime strategy is about our services. So the idea, and this is what we're currently doing, is actually that we make our services cross-consumable, which means that you have the possibility to instantiate and use the different services that we are providing on BTP, on this multi-cloud stack that we're talking on now, which is running on the hyperscalers, that we enable the services to be consumable and usable by the different runtimes that we're seeing here on the slide. The next very important aspect of the runtime strategy is that we really focus on leveraging BTP as the platform for the SAP environment, where we see our programming application models, like the cloud application programming model and the RESTful ABAP programming model, as very strategic within also the runtime strategy, to make it easy also to let your workloads that you're creating also being portable between at least the non-ABAP runtimes in this case, right? And the third thing that we're really using is actually build packs that help us really also do this portability on the workload level if we talk about Java or JavaScript-based runtimes here. So, I was talking about service cross-consumability, and I really would like to give you a status update because I said we are working on this. So today, not all services are cross-consumable between Cloud Foundry and Kyma, but a lot of services are already. So if you look at this list, there are some very important things that I would like to mention if you look at this list, because you might miss a lot of services that are not on the list here. So basically, when we talk about this cross-service consumability, we have to distinguish a little bit between the software as a service services, so where you just subscribe to the different services. These are by nature, do not really care about which environment or runtime you're using. But then there are the services that really expose APIs and that are instantiated on your SAP account. And for those services, we really have to look, is it possible to instantiate that out of a Kyma environment, for example? And so the services that are listed here are really just looking at the services that are already instantiatable from Kyma and Cloud Foundry, naturally. But also here, we are not looking at certain services. Like, for example, we have certain services, just a few, that are very specific to a runtime. Like, for example, the application autoscaler for Cloud Foundry, which really is a specific service for Cloud Foundry, whereas Kyma uses a completely different concept for the scaling of the solution. So here we see some differences. Then also we do not mention neo services. Naturally, I said we're looking at the strategic solutions here and the strategic runtimes. But we also do not list any deprecated services. Even some of them are also cross-consumable. So like, for example, mentioned here on the slide is also Service Ticket Intelligence, which is actually cross-service consumable, but we're not listing them as those are deprecated services. So there are some services left, just a few ones, but we are working on this at the moment to really make sure that you have the possibility to use them either on Cloud Foundry or on Kyma. So then, when it comes to then really to decide now, you have those different runtimes, dear SAP, what is the right runtime that I should use for a specific scenario? So there are different aspects that you should have a look at to really do a decisions. This, on the one hand side, of course, sometimes is defined by your use case or scenario. So, for example, if you need to have really high scaling environments or you have a huge distinction in the load that you have. For example, Kyma has its advantages to Cloud Foundry, for example. But also from a cost side, you might have some considerations where you see, okay, I just have one small application, which makes it maybe a little bit cheaper to run it on Cloud Foundry, whereas when you have several applications, it might be cheaper to run them on Kyma, right? So we really want to provide guidelines on a commercial side, on a scenario side, and also, of course, then really in the comparison between the runtimes. So we announced today the development guidelines for BTP, which is really, really important, which gives a general direction in what are the strategic solutions. So this has been already announced. We also just released this week the runtime guide that really helps you to decide what are the differences, where are the benefits of Kyma or of Cloud Foundry, so that you can make really a great decision on what is the right choice here for your scenario, for your specific situation to decide on. And also when it comes to the cost calculations, we have a dedicated solution for Kyma to make a cost estimation. And then we have, of course, on the Discovery Center, we have the cost estimator that helps you also do some information on estimation for Cloud Foundry and for ABAP. And for ABAP, we also provide some sizing guidelines that help you actually see how much is needed for your specific scenario. Now, what do we want to achieve with our runtime strategy is that, looking at our customers, it's really the case, we need to provide business continuity. And on the other hand side, we want to offer you, of course, a very modern runtime, right? And sometimes this is conflicting a little bit, but with the strategy, I think we're on a very, very good way to achieve that. So how do we do that? First thing is, I mentioned Cloud Foundry is one of our strategic solutions, and that's important. And we really have a long-term strategic commitment. I know there are competitors that walked out of Cloud Foundry. For us, we see that for many, many use cases that our customers do, specifically when it comes to extend business applications, Cloud Foundry is a great solution, and so we will stick to that in the future. On the other hand side, if you look, and we have to see this, if you look at reference architectures when it comes to cloud-native applications, we see that, in nearly every reference architecture from everyone who is publishing around that is based on Kubernetes. So we definitely also want to give you the possibility to use more modern runtime solutions and technologies here. That's why we're offering Kyma. Nevertheless, the question is, what is your individual path and where do you want to go? And is that a dead-end decision if you decide today for Kyma or Cloud Foundry or whatever? And the answer is we actually want to give you a good feeling that you can operate your applications for a long time, are very stable, and on the other hand side, do also the latest stuff that is possible with the latest technologies. And so, how do we do that? On the one hand side, I talked about the cross-consumption of services, which means that also if you want to port a workload from Cloud Foundry to Kyma, it uses the same services. And it's even easier as we're having the cloud application programming model that actually is available for Cloud Foundry as well as for Kyma. Meaning that today, if you develop an application, you can decide where you want to actually deploy the application. And it also makes it, of course, easier if you want to port it for whatever reason, because you have different requirements, you have more users coming up, you need to have scaling more, or you are just having more applications, and from a commercial perspective, it gets more interesting. You are able to move also your workloads from Cloud Foundry to Kyma quite easily. Right? And with this, we believe that we really have the chance to provide a future-proof business process platform or business application platform that helps you really keep your investments into BTP safe for all the developments that you're doing on the platform. Now, I was talking about the different services that are cross-consumable, and looking also into the today released guide for the development guidelines that we're offering you. We really see that we aligned or unified, as we're talking about unified platform, we really aligned the different services over the overall life cycle of your applications to really use and leverage strategic services we are providing for BTP. From the administrations and operations perspective, to the development, to the deployment as far as this can go, and then also to the operations and for observability topics. Right? There are some things that are naturally different. So when it comes to the deployment itself, yeah, of course, in CF, we have CF push. We try to make it a little bit more comfortable than normally it is when we talk about Kubernetes-based runtimes with Helm charts that we're using here. That's a difference between those two technologies, naturally. And I already mentioned this is also true when it comes to scaling, for example, because that is very individual for the different runtimes. So, and now you might ask, yeah, that is great, Arne, but what about build code that was announced today? And so, yes, I mean, build code is leveraging the same service portfolio here, so that the runtime strategy is really aligned with what we're actually doing in build code to really make sure that we have the same services. So we're aligned between the development guidelines, leveraging the services. We have the build code solution, leveraging the services. And from a runtime perspective, we really make sure that these services can be cross-consumed no matter which runtime you're choosing. So, last but not least, I said I really wanted to also talk some words on Neo. So also for existing Neo customers, we do not want to leave you alone with your migration to the multi-cloud stack here. So, of course, we have the different migration packages for the applications. So if you're running today an integration suite still on Neo, we have an integration package to migrate also for other services. But as this is a runtime session, I wanted to lay the focus a little bit on your workloads that you developed on Neo in Java. So we're talking about the Java server applications that you created. And there we also have something for you that is brand new. So at the moment, it's available under a test and evaluation agreement license. If you're interested, you find the email address here. It's SAP BTP migration@sap.com. And what is it? What we're actually offering? So basically, we just released this migration guide or migration package for Java on SAP BTP, which is a migration solution to help you bring your Neo workloads to Kyma. And how do we do that? So basically, it's a build pack that has the possibility to run on Kyma and actually mocks the different libraries that were needing to actually address the multi-cloud services where you used the Neo services in the past, right? You know, it's not the same services, as I said before, so that will not happen again, as we now have cross-consumable for our newer runtimes. And what we're doing here is really we're bringing the libraries into this build pack that actually lets your application use the multi-cloud services where you used the Neo services in the past. Not working for all services, to make this clear, but you see here a list where this is actually working very well. Second thing that is included is also then, of course, you need to instantiate the services, meaning that you also get some guidance here where actually that really helps you explain what are the different services that are needed. And if you instantiated them, then you have the chance to also use the Helm chart that is included to deploy your Neo application to the Kyma runtime. So again, if you're interested, SAP BTP migration at sap.com. And with that, that was my overview on the runtime strategy. So I hear until now there are no questions. If somebody has a question. Okay, so if that's not the case, there's one. I hear there is one coming. Okay, but I cannot see them on the screen until now. So, great, there are two questions. What is the on-prem runtime as compared to the cloud runtimes you covered? So basically, with BTP, we do not offer such thing as an on-premise runtime today. I know we have, with now the Edge integration cell, we have one component that is actually deployable on-premise. But actually, that's a complete solution. It's running on Kubernetes also, but it's its own solution. So there is no such thing as a runtime for the on-premise world. Can we run two environments is another question. And clearly, yes, of course, you can run two environments in parallel. Sometimes it really makes sense to do so if you're really having some solutions that need to have the Kyma specifics, especially when it comes to scaling. But you already have a lot of existing applications being running on Cloud Foundry. Definitely it makes sense to have them in parallel. Maybe you can think about migrating your Cloud Foundry solutions also to Kyma at one point in time, but of course it's possible to operate them in parallel. How easy would it be to migrate a service like OData from Neo? Yeah, I mean, a service from OData. So if you developed a service in Java on Neo and now you want to port this development to Cloud Foundry or to Kyma, it's pretty easy to do so, right? That is just the Java workload. This build pack is really interesting if you used some of the Neo services, right? Other than that, if you just did plain Java development on Neo, it's even easier to bring that actually to Kyma or Cloud Foundry. What else do we have? Are there any build packs planned to migrate Neo-based workload to CF? I mean, we have as far as I know, sorry, I'm not 100% sure here, but I think there is a migration guide for those applications. I don't think that there is plans to have a build pack for CF in this case. As Neo is sunsetting in 2028, what about the services that haven't been migrated to multi-cloud, like SAP Translation Hub? So for Translation Hub, we're definitely working on that. So most of the services will be available in the multi-cloud environment. And there are some services that have successor services. but normally there is either the same service being brought to the Cloud Foundry or the Kyma environment, mostly Cloud Foundry. For some, there are successor services, and for Translation Hub specifically, we're planning to do so. Is it possible to use Kyma open source on-prem and use XSUAA kind of SAP BTP services from SAP BTP? Oh, I just see that this question is already answered. Is that correct? I hope so. Other than that, it was kicked out too early. So then we have another question. Can we migrate CPI to Integration Suite running on Cloud Foundry Runtime? As said, for Integration Suite, there is a dedicated migration pack. So if you go to the documentation, there is a chapter for the migration from Neo to multi-cloud, and there you will find the material that is available to move to the Cloud Foundry version of Integration Suite. What else do we have? Let's see what are the ones that I have already answered. I answered that already. Is service cost doubled if we use two runtime environments? Depending on how you're using actually the services. Because you saw on the slide maybe there were some services where we said that they can also do instance sharing. So that means, so for example, it's not important for all services, but for example, persistency services like HANA Cloud, it's very important maybe to have applications that are deployed on Cloud Foundry and other applications that run on Kyma to use the same database. And that is possible for a lot of services, not for all, as I said, for not all it makes sense. And then there are other services where it doesn't really matter how many instances you have, because in the end you're just counting like API calls or whatever. So it doesn't matter if you're running that on one instance that is deployed to Kyma or to Cloud Foundry, or if you're using two instances that is shared. So normally you will not have additional costs. It's a little bit different if we talk about some of the big things, like when we're talking about instance or services that are measured by instances, like Integration Suite. In this case, it's different, right? If you deploy Integration Suite one time on Kyma, one time to Cloud Foundry, you will have two instances of that. But to be honest, that doesn't make much sense anyhow, right? Okay. We can maybe do one more question. When we onboarded BTP, our SAP representatives told us to favor Kyma before Cloud Foundry. Is Kyma the future direction? So as said, and I hope that this got clear, and I really like this as the last question, strategically, we stick also to Cloud Foundry, and that's important to understand. Nevertheless, looking at from a technology perspective, and I mean, here are a lot of technology lovers here, Kyma is the more modern runtime compared to these two. So strategically, I think it makes sense to consider Kyma as the runtime and the strategic direction also for you as a customer. Nevertheless, looking at the easiness of Cloud Foundry and also the scenarios that we're looking at a lot of our customers, Cloud Foundry is completely sufficient. So basically, it's really a very independent decision, but it's the more modern approach, let's say. So, with this, time is up. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it a lot to have those two sessions today. And you have another interesting day before you. Thank you.